Not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Emily Carver and this is Dewbs & Co. So tonight, despite being promised more control over our borders, has Brexit actually made illegal immigration worse? This comes with the news that since January 2021, Britain has not deported a single Channel migrant to France under its post-Brexit returns policy. Has Brexit made the situation worse, or do you see this whole thing as a Brexit betrayal? And last night, we spoke about how difficult it is to get an in-person appointment with a GP. Now, GPs have voted to cut their working hours to 9 to 5. They're complaining that their working arrangements are, in quotes, patriarchal and discriminate against those with children. Surely on six-figure salaries, this is not the time to be demanding fewer hours. Or am I wrong? Do you think GPs should be allowed to clock off a little bit earlier? I also want your views on whether the police are failing to keep women safe. Campaigners have launched a super complaint over police forces in the UK, arguing that they are failing to protect women from stalkers. This comes as our GB News presenter Ellie Costello revealed her year of hell after being stalked by one of her on-air guests. And protests have kicked off this afternoon at fast fashion company Boohoo's HQ in Manchester. That's after it was reported that conditions in their Burnley warehouse made workers feel like slaves. So, with Black Friday tomorrow, I'm asking, is it unethical? The whole thing. All of that to come tonight, but first let's go to the news headlines.
Emily, thank you. It's 6:02. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has said he has enormous respect for nurses, but their pay demands of 19% are simply unaffordable. Staff in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will walk out for 2 days on the 15th and 20th of December in their first ever national strike. The Royal College of Nursing has accused the government of rejecting formal talks as an alternative to industrial action. But Rishi Sunak says he's hopeful they can find a resolution.
Look, I have enormous respect and gratitude to our nurses, as everyone does, for the incredible job they do. And look, I know things are difficult right now for everyone because of what's happening with inflation. And that's why our plans that we outlined last week will get a grip of inflation and bring it down. That's really important. And in the meantime, what the unions are asking for, I think, is a 19% pay rise. And I think most people watching will recognise that that's obviously unaffordable. And that's why I'm pleased that the Health Secretary is sitting down, talking to the union, and hopefully we can find a way through this.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the government is shirking its responsibilities.
Nurses have been driven to this by the government, and that's a badge of shame for the government. They've never taken strike action before. And for patients, this is going to be devastating news. Nurses don't want to go on strike.
Meanwhile, teachers in Scotland will strike for a further 16 days next year over a pay dispute. The Educational Institute of Scotland says the consecutive days of action split across every council in the country will happen in January and February. It's after yesterday's strike closed nearly all primary and secondary schools. The Levelling Up Minister, Deanna Davison, has announced that she will stand down at the next election. The 29-year-old became Bishop Auckland's first ever Conservative MP in 2019. In a statement, Miss Davison said her role as an MP meant she had not been able to live anything like a normal life. She's now the 7th Tory MP to indicate they won't seek re-election next time round. The government says the bullying investigation into the Deputy Prime Minister has been expanded. Downing Street confirmed a third formal complaint has now been lodged against Dominic Raab. He denies any wrongdoing and says his behaviour and conduct is always professional. A government advisor on immigration has warned against proposals to reduce the number of international students coming to the UK, warning it could bankrupt universities. The Prime Minister is considering restricting foreign student admissions to top universities and cracking down on the number of dependents they can bring with them. Downing Street has insisted Rishi Sunak is fully committed to bringing overall immigration levels down. A former soldier has been convicted of killing a man more than 30 years ago at an army checkpoint in Northern Ireland. 53-year-old David Jonathan Holden was found guilty of the manslaughter of Aidan McAnespie in County Tyrone in 1988. Holden admitted firing the shot that killed him, but claimed it was an accident. Paul Young is the national spokesman for the Northern Ireland Veterans Movement. He says they'll appeal the verdict.
Veterans, I can say, will be deeply disappointed by this verdict. I'm saddened by it, but it's not over for David yet, because his team are, as far as I'm aware, are going to appeal the decision, and I think eventually, if necessary, go to the Supreme Court.
The Foreign Secretary has announced a package of hands-on support to help Ukraine through the winter. The country is still experiencing power blackouts after Russian airstrikes hit key infrastructure 3 days ago. During his first official trip to Kiev, James Cleverly pledged to send 35 more emergency vehicles, as well as a further £3 million to help rebuild the country.
Ultimately, I think it's incredibly important that the UK demonstrates to the Ukrainian people, who are bearing the brunt of this brutality from Russia, that we are standing shoulder to shoulder with them through our military support, through our humanitarian support, through our economic support, but also through the visible support.
And in the World Cup, England will play against the USA in an hour's time. They're hoping to secure 3 points and a place in the last 16. Well, earlier, Wales lost their match against Iran 2-0. Both goals were conceded in stoppage time after Wales were reduced to 10 men. Their World Cup hopes hang by a thread as they're now bottom of Group B with only one more game to play against England next week. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Dewbs & Co with Emily.
Thanks very much, Bethany. So, with me until 7, I'm going to introduce my panel. We have former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we have journalist and political commentator Joe Phillips with me until 7. Now, I want to know all of your thoughts on the hot topics this evening. The first, let me remind you, is, has Brexit actually awkwardly made illegal immigration more difficult to combat? That comes with the news that no Channel migrants have been deported to France under the post-Brexit returns policy, and the numbers just continue to rise. Do you blame Brexit, or do you think it's more of a Brexit betrayal by our politicians? I want to know your thoughts on that. And do you think that GPs should only work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's apparently what they want, and they voted in favour of cutting their hours. I'm thinking perhaps it's not the time to want to work less with the current difficulties within the NHS, but please do let me know. Do you think it's better for people with families to work 9 till 5? Perhaps our GPs deserve that after the hard work they put in. Let me know what you think. You can get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or on Twitter at GBNews. So we're going to ask my panel first. Has Brexit made it more difficult to get to grip with illegal Channel crossing? Home Office figures have revealed that since January 2021, Britain has not deported a single Channel migrant to France under its post-Brexit returns policy. The government introduced the new immigration rules in January of last year. Under the rules, they can declare asylum seekers inadmissible if they have travelled through a safe third country where they could have applied for asylum. However, in the 21 months since the rules were introduced, not one person who has crossed the Channel has actually been returned. Ben, it doesn't look like Brexit has sorted this out, does it?
Well, I don't think Brexit is relevant to illegal crossings of the Channel. I mean, it was illegal before we Brexited. It's still illegal. We were part of the Dublin III Regulatory Convention before Brexit, but that resulted in a grand total of a net 36 people ever being sent back to another EU member state, you know, in the 3 years prior to Brexit. So I don't think Brexit's relevant here. What we've got is years and years of government incompetence. And I think it's almost exemplified in the way that we tackle this whole debate. We see illegal crossings of the Channel as a deportation problem, not as border control. But of course, you only need a deportation policy, such as the one that you were talking about, you know, automatic expulsions to France. You only need a deportation policy if border control has failed. And what we haven't done in this country, David Cameron promised to do it, Theresa May promised to do it, all subsequent prime ministers, including Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and now Rishi Sunak have promised it, is to control our borders. But then they flip straight back into a discussion on deportation. It's very simple. The way to sort this problem, the way to sort this problem is for Border Force to do its job and to enforce our borders and push these boats back into French territorial water.
But hang on, it's not that simple, is it, Joe?
It is that simple.
We've paid the French.
It absolutely is.
We've paid the French. We've paid the French authorities, paid the French government tens of millions of pounds to
hundreds of millions.
Do that. To essentially police the borders, to stop the boats coming across. It hasn't worked. Is the problem that no one will cooperate with us now?
Well, part of the problem is that the inadmissible rule, which replaced Dublin III, as Ben said, rather depends on a degree of cooperation with other countries. And we slightly blew that with Brexit and our attitude to the French and blaming everybody else. I think part of the problem is that it is such a
I'll let you come back on that.
Hang on. The debate is so poisonous and so poisoned. When you talk about pushing boats back into the Channel to the French side, you're talking about pushing desperate people, women and children, into the most dangerous shipping lane in the world.
Well, they're halfway. They might as well go back the way they came.
OK.
Why is that any less safe going back to France than it is to get to the UK?
Let's make the point, though. If we were more efficient in dealing with the people who arrive, we've got 140,000 people who are still waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. We know that in the last year or so, that 70% of those who are processed, which is nowhere near that number, are then allowed their granted leave to stay.
Yes.
So if you speeded up the process by which people could apply for asylum, then you would be in a position to say you're here illegally. But you can't, even the Home Secretary, you know, the brightest woman in the world that stunned the committee hearing yesterday, couldn't even answer the question and was forced, when challenged by Tim Lawton, that actually the only way to seek asylum is to come here illegally.
Tim Lawton's question was completely inappropriate, in the abstract, and wrong.
But it made the point.
No, it didn't. What Suella Braverman should have said instantly is that we have specific programmes through which people can apply for asylum from specific countries for specific reasons, and all other asylum seekers are not welcome in the United Kingdom.
Right, so
we grant these programmes, and that is the process. Those are the safe legal routes.
All right, so
but we've come straight back to deportation. Tell me why we can't push the boats back. Tell me why.
Hang on.
No. We've got to understand. I want to understand why border control is non-existent. Why is it impossible for Border Force to do the job at our territorial waters that Border Force does at Heathrow Airport or other entry points in the United Kingdom? If you had 400 people coming off a jumbo jet and charging the E-gates, they would be mobbed by security and they'd have guns pointed in their face, they'd be handcuffed, they'd be marched to a room, put on a plane and sent back to where they came from. So why don't we do that at the point of entry
for a start,
in the sea?
You wouldn't be getting on a plane unless you had hijacked it, to use your analogy. These are people who are being ripped off. Let's just...
They are voluntarily paying thousands of pounds to get in a boat.
Joe finish.
This is part of the problem.
What's the problem?
The problem is that it's impossible to have a sensible debate
about
immigration because it is so violent.
It's not violent. These people are invading our country.
Firstly, let me just
sorry,
butt in.
I will not sit here and listen to you talk about people invading.
But that's what they're doing.
They are not. They are people. Many of them are people fleeing absolute horror.
What about the 12,000 Albanians?
Ben, let me just come in, because I do want to set a couple of things straight. I think the characterisation of those on boats as being women and children is a bit of a mischaracterisation. Yes, of course, there are women and children in desperate conditions who have crossed in the 70,000 odd that have done in the past few years. However, the majority, and we know from the most recent statistics, are Albanian men. We also know that the Home Office has been very slow in terms of processing asylum claims, but I would query whether any Home Office under any kind of jurisdiction, under any government, would be able to manage such a massive flow of thousands of people coming across every single day in dinghies. I would question whether that is possible.
Can I just come back on Ben's point that,
Yes.
you know, he was saying that Suella Braverman could have answered the question, well, you know, had we got a Home Secretary with any more wit or skill, she might.
Well, she's a very bright, capable lady.
Yeah, well, she's not doing terribly well at the moment. But part of the problem is that this has been so hijacked, if you like, by the fervent people who talk about invasion, who talk about swarms of immigrants, and who are... And you've got Home Secretaries, and you're quite right, Emily, that it doesn't matter who has been in that job, it is almost impossible to deal with, because what they are doing is not dealing with the problem of process, they're actually dealing with headlines. And they're coming out with, going to do this, we're going to put up barriers in the channel, you know, that's what Priti Patel said, we're going to have wave machines pushing them back. We're going to send them to Rwanda, we're going to do the... You know, we're coming up with stuff to make headlines, to appease a very...
But hang on, I'm not sure if it's to appease, because poll after poll shows that people are frustrated with this issue, and they're not all just Daily Mail readers who've been hyped up by discussion about invaders. People can see with their own eyes, they can hear with their own ears what is going on at our border, and they are allowed to be worried that their country has borders that are completely porous by the sounds of it.
Completely porous. And we've got a cost of living crisis. We've got essential services going on strike for the first time in British history. Rishi Sunak was on the news just before we came on saying we can't afford to give the nurses the pay rise they want. And here we are paying $7 million a day for accommodation for these people.
Probably more than that by now.
$7 million a day for... OK, well, that's the official figure for accommodation. It's costing... Are you kidding, Joe?
No,
Our population since 2010 has gone up by about 6 million people. You would have an open border policy, you'd flood the United Kingdom, you'd overwhelm our housing and our public services, and our country would collapse. We're already at the point of breaking.
Ben's very passionate, clearly, about this topic, like many of our viewers are. Joe, may I ask you, would you be in favour of open borders?
I would,
if you're honest.
I would be much more in favour of being sensible about letting people come through a process where they are properly processed, and if after 6 months or a certain length of time, let them work, let them contribute to the economy.
That would just be a massive pull factor in my view.
Absolutely.
But let's see.
That's the abrogation of border control.
I know what the viewers
and also the hotels are a total sham. There's no security in them. You can abscond very easily into the...
Emily, is that all immigrants or all illegal immigrants are bad people.
And your assumption is the opposite.
No, I'm
and
not.
Until they can prove who they are and that they're not antipathetic to the United Kingdom, they should not be allowed into the United Kingdom.
And prove who you are if you are fleeing a war zone.
Well, they're in France. They're not fleeing a war zone.
Why are we not
they're
sending
safe.
them back there?
Right, I will have to cut you off. It's been a heated debate, I think. I must go and see what our viewers who have had to sit through this.
I can tell you
hopefully
what
they've enjoyed
think.
the passion. See what they think. So David thinks, I feel totally betrayed. He says, I feel totally betrayed by the Conservative Party. All their promises have never been carried out. Illegal immigration is totally out of control. There is no clear solution in place, just hot air. And companies such as Serco and hotelier chains making an absolute fortune. That is true. Hotels have been offered millions to accommodate migrants and asylum seekers. Jim says Brexit is now just ignored by politicians. They want millions of migrants, cheap labour. I can't really argue with that. It does seem that the Conservative Party, having talked a big game about lowering net migration to the tens of thousands, seem to have absolutely no intention to do so. And it's been quite interesting watching Rishi Sunak sort of come up with these quick ideas on how to get those numbers down, and I doubt any will be implemented. And John, I must go to John, he says, no, 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 it's our problem, not the French. We must deal with it. We must stop them even landing. Why should the French care if they want to come to Britain? Well, I take that view, definitely. I don't think the French have any particular interest in stopping people from crossing the Channel. Why would they? They've got so many camps in northern France, and I'm sure they much would like to take the money and sort of bid farewell to those people, to British shores. Anyway, we're going to move on from that topic. Coming up, our GPs who earn six-figure sums right to demand a 9 till 5 working day. That would cut their hours by 2.5 hours. We'll see you in 3. Stay tuned.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, for my new show on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Friday, 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver, kicking off your weekend in spectacular fashion. With me until 7, my panel is former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, who is feeling very heated passionate.
I'm cool now.
And of course, we've got journalist and political commentator Joe Phillips with me as well. So, GPs in England have voted to reduce their hours to 9 to 5. They're complaining that their working arrangements are patriarchal and discriminate against those with children. Currently, all practices are required to provide services during core hours, that's 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m, Monday to Friday. Yesterday, it was revealed that hundreds of surgeries were still conducting less than half of appointments face-to-face. Let's remember also that family doctors earn on average £112,000 a year, so perhaps they shouldn't be looking to reduce their hours, but perhaps that's just my view. Joe, are GPs right to want to work less hours?
Well, let's just put this into context.
Okay.
First of all, this is not the British Medical Association, which, if you like, is the trade union for doctors. This is local medical committees.
Which influences the BMA.
They influence, but they are not representative. They're not the same. So it's slightly disingenuous to say that that GPs have voted, although some of the members of this committee will be. There were 36.1 million GP consultations in October. 40% of those were on the day of booking, and 71% were person to person, whether that's in person or on the phone. The number of GPs has fallen, full-time equivalent GPs, it's down 713 since 2019, when the government promised there would be 6,000 more GPs by 2024. Well, I don't know how they quite did the maths, because it takes a bit longer than that to train to be a GP. I think it's very easy to say, oh, 9 to 5. GPs don't work 9 to 5. They are constantly dealing with a greater range of complex issues. So somebody who is now, let's say, in their 70s, who may have, in previous decades, had one thing wrong with them, has now perhaps survived cancer, let's say, but will have a multiplicity
Very
of
complex needs.
Complex needs, complex medication, complex follow-ups and things like that. So because we've got a population that is living longer and are living with things that once upon a time would have been a death sentence, the demand for GPs' appointments and time is much, much greater. So their workload, even though it's not necessarily in numbers, the capacity for every patient going in is demanding more of them. So there are also, the real problem, I think, is the fact that GPs' facilities, or primary care facilities, are so variable across the country. You know, in some places you can't get to see a GP for weeks on end. In other places where I live, I'm very lucky, we've got a sort of a medical centre hub, so there's an awful lot of stuff that you can...
So maybe your view on the GPs might be slightly skewed, because for a lot of people, there is a feeling that the GPs aren't there when you need them. And we must say that a large portion, if not the majority, do work part-time. Is that a problem in and of itself, Ben? That there are too many part-time doctors who...
I mean, Joe made a fantastic argument for why their hours shouldn't be reduced, because we've got many more demands on them. There are many more people in the country, as we've just discussed in the previous bit of the programme. And I've got much, much greater sympathy for increasing nurses' wages and indeed even doctors' wages, not necessarily GPs, but doctors' wages, than I have for them cutting back their hours. Right now, the United Kingdom is facing problems right across the economic and public services front. And you don't deal with that by reducing the number of hours you work. If a private business is under pressure, people pull together, they work whatever number of hours they need to get their business through the problems. I've got much more sympathy, as I say, for increasing pay. We haven't talked about nurses' pay, but I completely disagree with Rishi Sunak that their demand, for example, of a 19% increase in wages is unreasonable. They've had a real wage reduction of around 30% in the last 12 years. It's right that that's put right. But what we mustn't do is be putting up wages and reducing the number of hours in our hour of need.
But may I just say, because the reasoning, apparently, for wanting to cut hours is for family life. That the current working arrangements don't suit people, particularly women, who have obviously want to spend more time with their family and have duties of care, etc., etc. I'm sorry, but that's the contract that they signed up to.
Absolutely.
Don't accept a job. I wouldn't accept a job if it didn't fit with the life I wished to lead. It seems ridiculous and totally anti-women in a way.
That is the most bizarre anti-feminist logic I've heard in a long time.
I consider myself a feminist. I'm just not a woke feminist.
So you sign up for something and then your life changes and you suddenly find yourself like many women.
But that's a contract, Joe, isn't it?
Then you get an au pair, or ask the grandparents to help a bit.
Right, and the grandparents are possibly...
Or your husband.
Or the grandparents are possibly looking after their elderly parents. Anyway, let's not go down into the personal thing. One of the problems is recruitment and retention.
Yes.
And retention is inevitably going to be harder for people who have got other lives that they need to get on with. The other thing is that this is about opening hours to consultations, it doesn't take into consideration the amount of time that a GP is spending. So you go and have some blood tests done. Somebody's got to interpret those when they come back. Somebody's got to organise follow-up appointments. Somebody's got to organise it. GPs are doing a lot more.
I'm sorry, you haven't
surgeries.
sold me that GPs are hard done by. I'm sorry, there are millions of people in this country who pick up overtime, who have long hours, who are paid considerably less than doctors. And yes, I do think that doctors should feel high status. They've gone through huge amounts of training and so on, and should be paid well. But to demand shorter hours because it doesn't quite suit your family priorities.
And to be demanding shorter hours and demanding more money at the same time when you've got massive problems in the NHS.
I'm sorry, I think that is lazy journalism. This is
Well, it
this
isn't.
Is typical.
Well, let me tell you, I was on a programme last night and there was a lady in the audience who asked a question, and she opened by saying she had to wait 6 weeks in order to get an appointment with her GP, and when she was given an appointment, it was 4 weeks hence. It was 10 weeks before she could actually see a GP. That's not going to be improved by reducing the number of hours GPs work.
No, but it's not going to be improved by GPs leaving the service, which is the alternative.
No.
May I say...
It's not binary, Joe.
May I tell you what? Why don't we see if there's any GPs out there?
Yes, well, I invite any GPs who are sitting at home with their heads in their hand. Do you agree that GP hours should be cut? Or perhaps you think GPs just need to be paid more and then they'd be incentivised to work longer hours? Because it seems to me that we already don't have GPs really available at the weekend when most people would like to see a GP. If we only have 9 till 5, when are all the other working people going to be able to see a GP? And there is so many restrictions already on GPs' time. I think this is probably the worst time ever after the huge NHS, after the pandemic, and now with NHS waiting lists as they are, for GPs to be demanding a cut in hours. Like Ben, I'd be more sympathetic to them wanting a bit of a pay bump, although GPs are very handsomely paid.
Well, they are paid as they are self-employed, so they are paid out of their practice. They get a certain amount, or the practice gets a certain amount of money from the government per patient. But that isn't, that is not necessarily a ratio to the patient's needs or the amount of time that they spend with the patient who comes in. I think there are several things here. One is that I think we have, as a public, we have sometimes unrealistic expectations that a doctor will sort everything out, and you could go and see a pharmacist, you could perhaps see a practice nurse. Many of the things that used to be done by different organisations are now done by GPs' surgeries, and that puts a lot of pressure on the GPs. There's an awful lot of administration with, drugs and, as I said, the referrals. And
the system's antiquated.
But these are all arguments for them working longer hours, not less.
But they're not saying, and this is why I get so angry about this lazy
Well, they
journalism.
have voted. I'm sorry,
No, the local medical committees. This is not GPs.
Well, that represents GPs.
It's a body that influences
If
the
we have a
BMA.
look, if we have a look at what one chap said, what one doctor said, Dr. John Allingham from Leeds LMC, he voted against the motion.
Yeah.
He said it's an own goal. He said consultants have found themselves vilified recently for not working weekends. It's important that we don't make ourselves a target by insisting on working 9 till 5. I don't think having 9 to 5 will win hearts and minds. It sounds like he's got a sensible head on his shoulders and realised that there's a need to sort of read the room. I must go to some of our viewers' views.
But what about the consultants that he refers to, who are doing very nicely, thank you, in private practice? Hospitals are sweating the assets to see people doing MRI and CT scans over the weekends, which means that, technicians and phlebotomists and various other staff are there to try and get people through on a lot of this diagnostic stuff. But we've got, as Ben says, a very antiquated system. If all the time you have to get a referral from your GP and there is no other way around it...
I do agree, referrals are madness.
That is
completely agree. Yeah.
Let's have a look at what people at home are saying.
I want to hear from
now,
the GP.
Anne says, I don't know if we've got a GP. I don't think we have a GP yet, but please do get in touch if you're watching. I wonder if my aunt, who was a GP, if she'll get in touch, perhaps she's watching. But Anne says, maybe patients could accommodate the desire of GPs and only be ill 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I mean, It's you know, I can see the rationale of that. Ian says they want to work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday because of family life reasons. They should be allowed this. These people have families too. But you could say that about anyone who has a family, surely. When you sign up to a job, you understand that there are conditions, and GPs can already go part-time. They don't have to work, you know, every single day. They already have quite flexible working hours, and they have.
And then people don't like to see the locums.
They have a very good life-work balance in general, far better than junior doctors or surgeons or other consultants. I think being a GP is a very good job to have.
The country is in a very difficult place at the moment. People should be increasing working hours as a general principle, not reducing them.
It's not going to happen, though, Ben. Morale is low across the country.
Money is a different issue, and that needs to be addressed.
But I was talking about morale.
Yeah, morale. And I think, by the way, money sorts out morale. If you're valued, if you're getting your value, it makes a huge difference. I remember during the pandemic, everyone coming out on the streets and clapping, which, by the way, I found almost patronising. I found it disgusting.
Yeah.
And I did a comparison of the average wage of a nurse in the UK with the USA.
We're going to have to wrap it up very quickly because the break is
American nurses are paid twice as much as British nurses. American doctors are paid twice as much as British doctors. It's not irrelevant. It's relevant.
The US has a completely different system that's paid for very, very differently. But I do think the NHS probably could do with a bit of a sprucing up, perhaps a radical reform here and there. Thank you very much for sending in all your opinions. We'll get to those. And please, if you're a GP, get in touch and tell me what you think. Am I talking rubbish? Are my panel talking rubbish? Or are they switched? What do you agree with?
To me.
Joe, no, of course not.
But she looked at me. She looked at me.
Ben, because coming up, we're going to be switching topics. We're going to be talking about whether the police are failing to protect women. We ask because the National Stalking Consortium submitted a complaint against the police. See you in 3. Stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Yes, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver, with you until 7. I will reintroduce my panel, former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, and journalist and political commentator, Joe Phillips. Now, we're going to go to the football. England's footballers play their second World Cup match tonight in Qatar. They face the USA, knowing a win will see them qualify for the knockout stages with one match still to play. Our reporter Paul Hawkins is in Doha for us. Paul, what's the atmosphere like?
Yeah, it's good. It's good in this part of Doha. We're in Musharraf, downtown Musharraf, but the atmosphere building at the Al Bayt Stadium about 45 minutes away from us. 20 minutes to go until kick-off, until England take on the USA, knowing that a win will put them through to the second round of the World Cup with one game to spare. The Welsh will be hoping that the Americans and the English draw tonight's game. That would then leave Wales needing to beat England on Tuesday in order to qualify for the next round. The reason Wales are in that situation because they lost 2-0 to Iran earlier today. The Iranians scoring right deep into stoppage time with two late goals in that one. The Welsh well under par in that game. Also, the latest results from the World Cup, the Netherlands are drawing 1-1 with Ecuador. That means Qatar are out of the World Cup. They're the first group nation, the first host nation, I should say, to go out of the World Cup at this stage so early on. Qatar did manage to score a goal early on in the day when they lost 3-1 to Senegal. So that's how it's shaping up at the World Cup. 20 minutes to go until the USA kick off against England. England unchanged from that match against Iran earlier on in the week.
Thank you, Paul. There he is from Doha. He's looking very bronzed. He's looking like he's got a little suntan from being over there in the sunshine all day. It's a bit more gloomy over here, but please do stay with us on Dewbs and Co. and don't switch over to the football. I'm sure it'll be a boring match anyway. Now, campaigners. Oh, and if you're a GP sitting at home, please do get in touch and let me know what you think about this vote for a 9-to-5 working hours. Do you think I'm being a bit harsh about the GPs and that actually a right to a family life is a good thing and should help with recruitment and retention, perhaps? Now, campaigners have launched a super complaint over police forces in the UK, arguing that they are failing to protect women from stalkers. This happens as our GB News presenter Ellie Costello revealed her year of hell after being stalked by one of her on-air guests. Campaigners say that victims are being put at risk because of police systemic failures. Joe, are police failing women?
Certainly in the evidence that this group are putting forward, yes, because it is clear that police forces, by and large, are not taking it seriously. I think the figures of 14 forces have gone above the minimum requirement, but only 4 forces don't have a single point of contact for stalking, despite a government recommendation. I think the problem is that it's one of those things that isn't taken seriously. You know, is somebody stalking you? We've all heard Ellie's harrowing experience this week. And I think, you know, there are huge questions about the police, and I think they need to really work very hard to regain any trust of women. We've seen and we know all too well the horror that was Wayne Couzens, a serving police officer. We know that there are many serving officers who are either being investigated or have been investigated and not sacked for sexism, misogyny, homophobia, racism, and that casual disregard for other people. We saw the way the police manhandled women at a peaceful vigil for Sarah Everard in Clapham Common, incidentally, while people in West...
So you're saying, essentially, that it's not only that the police aren't adequately dealing with cases when they come to them, of women being stalked or other matters, but also the entire culture of the police is infected by misogyny.
Well, I'm not saying the entire, because, you know, there are many...
But there are systemic
There
failures.
are many police officers who do a really good job, and there are many police officers who will take it seriously and who are empathetic and understanding. But for somebody to go to the police and report somebody who's stalking them, you're not going to do it the first time because you're going to think, oh, it's just a coincidence. You're going to wait. So you're building up your own anxiety. It's a bit like bullying, you know? You're building up your own anxiety before you think anyone will take you seriously.
Yes, and it's something that you know, people have instincts. They know when something's not right, but it's harder to articulate that, and it's harder to get police perhaps to believe you or to take it seriously, because there are many men out there and women alike who will send inappropriate messages, too many messages, pester and so on. When does it turn into stalking? But I believe that it's only become a specific offence in the last 10 years or so.
Which is
quite astonishing, because women have been stalked for...
Well, and you'd think it would, you know, it would be covered by harassment or you know, being a nuisance and things, but, you know, too many times women are murdered by ex-partners or, you know, jilted boyfriends, husbands, what have you, because the police haven't taken it seriously.
Now, Ben, are we too quick to label institutions misogynistic? I'm reading here, front page news of The Times, is that an inquiry has revealed toxic culture of misogyny in the fire brigade too.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Is just everything in the UK full of rampant sexism?
And racism and who knows what else. But, I mean, I'm not close enough to the fire brigade or the police, for that matter, to comment about their misogyny one way or the other. But what I can say from the stats...
Never thought about being a fireman?
No, sadly not, no. A fireman Sam came for my children, but not for me. I mean, what I can say, just looking at the stats, is that in fact, the number of charges brought for stalking exceeds the number of charges brought generally for serious crime. So of 100 crimes, serious crimes committed, only about 3.5% end up in someone being charged.
I mean, that is astonishing.
It is astonishing.
It's a scandal, really.
It's a scandal. And there's a much bigger issue at play here. I'll come back to the women point, but there's a much bigger...
Very quickly.
There's a much...
shouted at.
OK, right. There's a much bigger point here, and I think that policing is failing in this country. And to keep law and order is a very finely balanced confidence trick. People need to believe that they will be caught if they commit a crime. And that belief is beginning to be undermined. And I'm feeling, it's anecdotal, but I'm feeling that we're losing control of law and order in the UK. And that could be disastrous, because no amount of numbers of police officers on the streets will be able to police the country if the belief that you will be caught is trashed.
Oh, yeah, I remember when shops on Oxford Street, the main shopping road in London, were ransacked by youths. And, I mean, I can't imagine how they thought they'd get away with it, but clearly they did, and I'm sure many of them got away with it. Anyway, we're going to have to cut that discussion short, because coming up, do sale days like Black Friday contribute to unethical conditions for workers? This comes as protests take place outside Boohoo HQ. See you in 3.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, whilst the waiting list for treatment spirals, the NHS tells its menopausal staff to stay home and do lighter duties. Our health service has lost the plot. In My Take at 10, Nicola Sturgeon's independence dream is in tatters. McBrexit is off the table, thank God. In The Big Question, should it be more difficult to go on strike? Plus a stunning new book all about Elvis Presley. We speak to the author. And my all-star panel and tomorrow's papers. We're live at 9.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver, with you until 7. My panel again, former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, and journalist and political commentator, Joe Phillips. Now, it seems that GPs have become the thread that's running through the show this evening, and I'm calling on any GPs at home to let me know what you think about working 9 to 5 only.
I think they're all still at work.
So you think they're not watching then, Joe?
I think they're probably dealing with endless patience.
They're slaving away. They clock off at 6:30. They could be tuning in now.
That's when they stop seeing people.
OK, so maybe there aren't any GPs watching the show this evening because it's far too early and you're still working very hard. Well, hopefully you'll watch on YouTube on Catch Up later. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Boohoo. Today is one of the biggest shopping days of the year, Black Friday. Consumers are rushing to get good deals and discounts. But do cheap products, like the ones that Boohoo, fast fashion brand, make, mean cheap labour too? Well, protests have kicked off at the fast fashion company's HQ in Manchester after it was reported that conditions in their Burnley warehouse made workers feel like slaves. Ben, do sale days like Black Friday contribute to unethical conditions?
Well, I think that's looking at the problem. You know, that's cart before horse, looking at the problem the wrong way around.
Am I making a few leaps there?
Yeah, I think there's got to be presumption when someone goes into a shop to buy something that the product that they're buying has been legally produced in all respects, and that the employment rights of those people who worked on the creation of that product had been upheld. So to somehow say that because there's a sale, particularly now when there's a cost of living crisis, inflation going through the roof, and every family I think, has an obligation to itself to minimise their costs as they go through, save money, be prudent and so on, to somehow turn the moral question round.
Sound like a right Grinch, Ben.
What? Well, I mean, you do, don't you?
Yeah,
your primary obligation is to your family.
I think a lot of people are going to be downsizing their Christmas this year.
Absolutely. And people are having to cut their cloth according to their means, and I think it's very unfair to somehow introduce a moral dimension to their desire to cut costs and somehow blame Boohoo's potentially, allegedly bad practices on their shopping habits. Boohoo's, I don't think it's the first time Boohoo's been in the press, by the way. I think this has raised its ugly head
haven't. Well,
before.
Boohoo is one of those fashion brands, if you don't know them. They're a fashion brand at home. They are a fashion brand that essentially sells, obviously other brands are available, but they're a fast fashion brand that sells dresses, from £4 for parties for mostly young people, mostly teenagers and upwards, young women especially. And, a lot of young people talk about how they're socially conscious. They're all about social justice and sustainability, yet it doesn't seem to stop Boohoo from having bumper mega deals and people rushing to buy from them.
There are many, many companies out there. I don't think Boohoo's the only one. There are, thousands of cheap shops. But I think the question is, if something is that cheap, you've got to ask yourself why it's that cheap. And it doesn't matter whether it's a party frock or a chicken. No, but seriously, at one point, the chicken's probably not been kept in very nice circumstances and possibly been fed with all sorts of things. And I should imagine if you're getting something that is really cheap, it probably has been made by people living in conditions that are not.
Now,
particularly different to the chicken.
Now, whether Black Friday is immoral, I'm not sure. I think it's actually a good thing that people can get deals and can buy things that they may not be able to purchase at other times of the year. That's great. But I do worry if we attack fast fashion brands too much in this country, all that will happen is that Boohoo will decide that they're not going to keep their factory in Burnley and they'll have a factory in I don't know, the Philippines or Eastern Europe or China, India, and so on, where the working conditions will be even less well regulated. But what do you think of that?
Well, I agree. I think there's a real danger of driving enterprise offshore. And, you know, the Chancellor is making a really good fist of that at the moment by putting taxes up on companies, making it difficult for self-employed to make money, taxing investments, taxing dividends, increasing capital gains tax. You know, we mustn't make an enemy of the private sector. The private sector drives the economy.
And Julie at home says Black Friday encourages people to spend money on tat. Yes, that's true. Yes. That they wouldn't typically buy and which is obviously overpriced for 364 days of the year. We must support local businesses and boycott Black Friday. Well, that's the other point, isn't it? People just do all their shopping on Amazon, particularly on Black Friday or in the week. It seems to go on forever. It's not really Black Friday, is it? It's Black November, really. There are deals all the month.
There's no such thing as a good deal. You know, and I'm sure
sometimes there are good deals.
Well, sometimes there are, but, you know, I'm sure Ben and I are both old enough to remember the days when there was a sale and people used to camp outside on Boxing Day in order to get a three-piece suite or a fridge. Now there are sales all year round. Everybody, as Ben says, is feeling the pinch. And I think stuff that is encouraging people to spend and people are feeling vulnerable because they feel they ought to, coming up to Christmas, stop
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Joe, because I'm going to have to say goodbye to both of you. Thank you very much, Ben.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Joe,
Thank you.
for joining us this evening. Michelle will be back on Monday alongside Toby Young and Matthew Stadden. That should be a good one. Now, Lawrence Fox will be with us at 7 o'clock with a brand new show. Lawrence, what's coming up?
Good evening. This evening on Lawrence Fox Show number 1, we will be talking about kneeling bull chasers, rainbow timepieces, and Sadiq Khan's latest plan to make Londoners poorer than they can possibly be. But first to the weather.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Next week is looking drier than this week, but for the weekend, we've got another bout of wet and windy weather on the way. It will turn things a bit milder briefly before the drier weather next week turns things colder. For the time being, our weather is coming from the west. Now, we've seen this ridge of high pressure affecting many of us on Friday. That's led to a fine day with a break in between weather systems, but there is still some rain around during the evening, some showers for western areas, some longer spells of rain for the northwest of Scotland. Otherwise, clear spells for many, especially during the first part of the night, and lighter winds. That will allow temperatures to dip to 3 or 4 Celsius in the east of England. A few mist patches first thing here on Saturday morning. But further west, it's a much milder start to the day because here we've got the winds whipping up. We've got some rain pushing into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland first thing, that reaching Wales, and then eventually the southwest of England later. The rain initially on and off, light and patchy, but it turns heavier and more persistent in the far west by the end of the afternoon. However, the winds, albeit with coastal gales, will be coming up from the south, and so they'll be mild, 13, 14, perhaps 15 Celsius in places. It's dry in the southeast and the far north of Scotland until the evening. That's when the rain pushes through. And for parts of Scotland, the rain, heavy and persistent, could cause some issues with that wet weather coming down on already saturated ground. But by the end of Saturday night, it is turning drier in many places except the southeast, and there'll be a slice of clear spells across central areas as we begin Sunday. Still, though, a lot of cloud remaining, and across East Anglia in the southeast, after a brief respite in the rain, there is more wet weather coming up during the afternoon, some heavy and persistent bursts of rain for London, East Anglia and the southeast. Showers for Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales, and there'll still be a few showers around on Monday, but overall the theme next week is for it to turn drier.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at at 11 p.m. on GB News.